I never expected a boat mechanic to be the guy who'd turn my whole summer upside down, but here I am 3 weeks in thinking about nothing else. It started on a Tuesday, of all days, when my clumsy attempt to fix my dad's old fishing boat almost ended with me falling into the harbor. That's when he showed up. This guy with grease on his hands and a grin that was way too confident for someone covered in engine oil. So picture this: me, Mark, 27, city kid through and through, suddenly stranded on this sleepy little dock town that's more about salt, air, and seagulls than Wi-Fi and coffee shops. I'd come here for a break from the usual grind, trying to figure out what to do with my life after a rough breakup and a job that felt like it was just paying the bills. Dad's fishing boat, this old hulking thing, was supposed to be my ticket to some peace, maybe even a new hobby. Instead, it was a ticking time bomb of mechanical nightmares. And then there was him, Jake. He's this guy who's been working on boats since he was a kid, his whole life tied to these docks. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with this way of looking at a busted engine like it was a puzzle made just for him. When I asked for help, he didn't just offer advice or point me towards some YouTube tutorial. No, he said I needed hands-on training. I thought he was joking, but no, he meant it. That first day, he took me under his wing, showing me the ropes, literally and figuratively. The smell of diesel, the salty breeze, the constant hum of boat engines, it all started feeling strangely right. He was patient but teasing, and I caught myself wanting to impress him, even though I barely knew how to change a spark plug. But here's the thing, as much as I wanted to learn about boats, I found myself wanting to learn about him even more. There was something about Jake, maybe the way he fought the tough exterior with little laughs, or the way his eyes softened when he talked about his dreams beyond the docks, that pulled me in. And when he said I needed hands-on training, it wasn't just about engines. It was about trust, about letting someone in. I'm not the kind of guy who falls for someone in a day, but Jake, he made me rethink a lot. And just as I was starting to feel like maybe this summer wouldn't be a total disaster, something happened that made me realize this was going to be way more complicated than I thought. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that first morning on the dock, the one where I almost drowned before I even knew his name. Because that's where all of this really began. That morning, the sun was barely up, casting this soft orange glow over the water. I was standing on the edge of the dock, trying to get a grip on the fishing boat's engine, which, honestly, looked more like a heap of rusted parts than an actual machine. I was already feeling out of my depth when I slipped, yeah, classic me, and almost fell straight into the cold harbor. As I flailed, trying to grab onto something, anyone, out of nowhere this pair of strong hands caught my arms and yanked me back onto solid ground. Whoa, easy there. You trying to swim with the fish? The voice was deep, steady, with just a hint of amusement. I looked up and there he was, Jake, the guy with the grease-stained cap and the kind of calm confidence that made you think he'd seen way worse than a clumsy city kid almost drowning. I was panting a little, embarrassed as hell. No, I was just inspecting the engine, I stammered, wiping my hands on my jeans. He laughed, this low, genuine sound. Sure you were. You're lucky I was around. These docks can be unforgiving for rookies. I wanted to play it cool, but honestly, I felt like a total rookie. He helped me straighten up the tarp that had slipped off part of the engine, then squatted beside it like it was some ancient artifact only he could decode. Name's Jake, he said, sticking out his hand. And you are? Mark, I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, no nonsense. All right, Mark, he said. So what's your deal? You fixing boats for fun? Or is this some kind of midlife crisis? I laughed, which helped break the awkwardness. Something like that. Needed a change from city life. Thought I'd maybe learn something new. But, yeah, definitely not a mechanic. Jake gave me a look that was part skepticism, part challenge. Well, you're in luck, because boats don't fix themselves. If you're serious about this, you're gonna need some hands-on training. He said it like it was obvious, but I wasn't sure if he was offering or warning me off. I nodded, not wanting to look like I was backing down. Yeah, I'm serious. The next thing I knew, he was grabbing a wrench, handing it over like it was a baton in a relay race. All right, first lesson. When you're working on an engine, you gotta respect it. It's like a living thing. touch the wrong part, and it'll bite. Hands shaking, I took the wrench and watched as he showed me how to loosen a bolt. His hands moved sure and steady, and every now and then, his fingers brushed mine. Nothing electric, just brief, but enough to make me notice. We spent the morning like that, him coaching, me fumbling, both of us laughing when I inevitably messed up. Around noon, we sat on the edge of the dock, feet dangling over the water, eating greasy sandwiches from the corner shop. He told me about growing up there, learning to fix boats from his grandpa, how the docks were more than just a job, they were family. I shared a bit about city life, about my ex, about feeling kind of lost. There was this moment, just us, salt air, and the distant cry of gulls, where I realized I wasn't just enjoying the work, I was enjoying the company. Over the next few days, Jake's hands-on training became our routine. Every morning, he'd meet me at the dock, and we'd tackle the boat piece by piece. I was surprised at how much I was learning, but more than that, I was surprised at how much I looked forward to those mornings. One afternoon, after a particularly frustrating session where the engine refused to cooperate, I was about to give up when Jake said, "You're getting better, you know. You've got the knack." I looked over at him, his face lit by the fading sun, and maybe I was reading too much into it, but there was something softer in his eyes. "Thanks," I said. "Couldn't have done it without you." He shrugged it off, but then, unexpectedly, he leaned in and whispered, "Maybe next time, you'll teach me something." My heart skipped. "Like what?" He smirked, that confident, playful smirk that made me want to know all his secrets. "I don't know yet, but I'm counting on you to find out." That night, I lay awake thinking about him, about the way he looked when he was focused, the way he laughed, the subtle way he'd brush against my arm when passing tools. It was confusing and thrilling all at once. I told myself to keep it casual, just a summer fling with a boat mechanic who knew way more than I did. But deep down, I knew this was the start of something I wasn't ready to let go of. And just when I thought I had a handle on things, Jake dropped a bomb. "Mark," he said one evening as we closed up shop, "there's a big race coming up, the one that puts this town on the map. I'm entering a boat, but I could use a partner. You in?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Me? I don't know the first thing about racing." He grinned. "That's the point. You've got hands-on training now. Time to put it to the test." I hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's do it." I had no idea what I was signing up for, but something told me the boat race was going to change everything. And maybe, just maybe, Jake and I were about to learn a lot more than how to fix engines. Signing up for the race was one of those moments where I realized how much Jake had pulled me out of my comfort zone. Racing wasn't just about speed. It was about trust, teamwork, and knowing your boat inside and out. And me? I was still figuring out what end of the wrench to use. The days leading up to the race were a blur of grease, sweat, and surprisingly, laughter. Jake was patient but firm, pushing me to learn fast. We'd arrive early, working side by side, my hands getting dirtier by the hour, but my confidence growing with every turn of a bolt and every engine test. One morning, as we were prepping the boat, Jake caught me staring at him instead of the engine. I tried to look away, flustered, but he just grinned. "You're not just admiring my mechanical skills, are you?" I chuckled nervously. "Maybe a little." He stepped closer, the salty breeze ruffling his hair, and for a second, everything else faded. The harbor, the engines, the noise. "You're different, Mark," he said quietly. "Most people come here, see the docks, the boats, then leave. But you stick around. You want to learn." I looked down, suddenly shy. "I guess I'm not great at sticking around." Jake's smile softened. "Maybe that's why I like having you here." That hit me harder than I expected. Training wasn't just about mechanics and racing lines anymore. It was about moments like that, unexpected, genuine, where the walls between us felt thinner. I found myself opening up, telling him things I hadn't said in years. About my fears, about the mess my last relationship left me in, about how scared I was of starting over. Jake listened, never judging, just holding space for me. And in return, he shared pieces of himself. The dreams he had beyond the docks, the struggles with family expectations, the quiet loneliness that came with a life spent fixing other people's boats. One evening, after a long day of practice, We sat on the dock, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air was thick with salt and the promise of something new. Jake nudged me with his shoulder. "You ready for tomorrow?" I shrugged, pretending to be casual, but my heart was racing. As ready as I'll ever be. He turned to me, eyes serious now. "It's not just about the race, Mark. It's about trust. You trust me, I trust you. We've got to have each other's backs out there." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I trust you." He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that made my chest tighten. Then, almost shyly, he reached out and took my hand. "Good. Because I'm not just racing for the win. I'm racing for us." My breath caught. I squeezed his hand back, words failing me. The night before the race, I barely slept. My mind buzzed with excitement, nerves, and this new, thrilling ache that I couldn't quite name. Was it just the adrenaline, or was it something more? Race day arrived with a cool breeze and a bright sky. The docks were buzzing with people. Locals cheering, boats lined up, engines roaring. Jake and I climbed into the boat, the familiar scent of oil and sea wrapping around us like a second skin. As we settled in, Jake looked over at me and gave a wink. "Ready to make some waves?" I smiled back, heart pounding. "Let's do this." The race was intense. The boat surged forward, cutting through the water with a power I'd only dreamed of understanding. Jake's hands were steady on the controls, his voice calm in my ear as he shouted instructions. I handled the ropes, the gears, whatever needed doing, learning to move with the rhythm of the boat and the water. At one point, we hit a rough patch. A sudden swell rocked the boat hard enough to knock the wind out of me. For a split second, I feared we'd tip over. But then Jake's hand found mine, gripping tight, steady. "Hold on, Mark. We've got this." That simple reassurance was everything. I tightened my grip, matching his confidence, and together we pushed through the waves. When we crossed the finish line, the crowd erupted in cheers. We hadn't won first place, but the look in Jake's eyes told me it didn't matter. We'd done it. Together. Afterwards, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the dock, Jake pulled me aside. "You surprised me, you know, not just with how fast you learned, but with how much you cared." I shrugged, feeling a bit bashful. "I guess I did too." He laughed, that infectious laugh that made the world feel lighter. Then he leaned in, his breath warm against my cheek. "You want to grab a drink? Celebrate?" I nodded, heart pounding, because suddenly, this summer wasn't about fixing a boat or running from the past. It was about something real, something I never expected to find on these old docks. And it was just the beginning. We ended up at this little bar just a few blocks from the docks. Nothing fancy, worn wooden floors, a jukebox in the corner playing some classic rock, and the smell of salt and spilled beer hanging in the air. Jake seemed right at home there, chatting with the bartender like they'd known each other forever. Me, I was just trying not to look like a city kid completely out of place, but honestly, Jake made it easy. We grabbed beers and found a quiet corner booth. The noise faded a bit, and it felt like suddenly it was just the two of us. The rest of the world pushed back. "So," Jake said, leaning forward with that mischievous grin, "did you enjoy your first race?" I smiled, feeling that warm buzz from the beer and from him. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. But I think I might be hooked. He laughed. "Good. Because I'm planning on dragging you through a few more before summer's over." I raised my bottle in mock protest. "Is that a threat or a promise?" "Both," he said, eyes glinting. "You're stuck with me now." There was something about the way he said that, like it wasn't just about the boats, but about us. And it made me realize how much I wanted to be stuck with him too. The night stretched on with easy conversation, little jokes, and the kind of laughter that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. At one point, the jukebox switched to a slower song and Jake nudged me. "Dance with me?" I blinked, surprised. "Now? Why not?" "It's not like we have a race tomorrow." I hesitated, but then I stood up, letting him take my hand. We moved to the small, empty space near the jukebox, and for a few minutes, it was just us swaying to the music, the rest of the world blurring away. His hands were warm on my waist, and I felt this electric mix of nerves and something softer. Comfort, maybe? Or hope. When the song ended, he pulled me closer, voice low. I've wanted to do that since day one. I laughed, heart racing. Is that so? Yeah, he said, eyes locked on mine. You're not like anyone I've met around here. You make me want to be better. I swallowed hard, the words sinking in deeper than I expected. Jake, but before I could say more, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, frowned, then sighed. That's probably my sister. She's been worried about me being out here so much. I nodded. Family stuff? He shrugged. Yeah, they don't get why I'm still here, chasing boats and races instead of moving on with my life. Sometimes it's hard. I reached out, giving his hand a squeeze. I get that. For the first time, the confident, easygoing mechanic looked a little vulnerable, and I wanted to be the one to hold on to that for him. The night wrapped up with promises to meet again the next day, and a slow walk back to the docks under a sky full of stars. The salty breeze wrapped around us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I'd found a place where I could breathe. But as the days passed, the race became more than just a competition. It was a countdown. Counting down to the moment I'd have to decide if I was ready to really trust someone again, if I was ready to let Jake in. One afternoon, while we were fixing up some tweaks to the boat, Jake got quiet, focused in a way I hadn't seen before. Then he looked up and said, "Mark, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." My stomach flipped. "What's up?" He took a deep breath, the kind that feels like it's carrying the weight of months. "I've been thinking about what comes after the race. After this summer. Because I'm not sure I want it to end." I blinked, heart pounding. "Neither do I." He smiled, a little shy this time. "Good. Because I think there's more between us than just the boat and the race." I nodded, feeling all the walls I'd built crumble just a little. "Yeah, I felt that too. We didn't say much after that, just worked side by side, but the air between us had changed. It was charged with possibilities and a quiet hope. Then, a few days before the next big race, something happened that threw everything off balance. I was cleaning tools in the shed when I heard raised voices outside. I peeked out and saw Jake arguing with a man I didn't recognize, a tall, sharp-suited guy who looked like he didn't belong in this town. "I told you I'm not selling," Jake said, voice tense but steady. The man's jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake. This deal could set you up for life." Jake shook his head. "I'm not interested. This is my home." I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Something about this stranger and that conversation didn't sit right. Later that night, Jake told me the whole story. His family's been trying to pressure him to sell his part of the docks to developers who want to turn the place into a marina. A chance to make money, sure, but it meant losing the heart of everything he loved. "I don't know what I'm going to do," he admitted, frustrated. "I'm torn between what's expected of me and what I want." I reached for his hand again. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." "With you." He looked at me then, a flicker of something fierce and thankful in his eyes. "That means more than you know." That night, lying awake, I realized this was bigger than just a summer fling or a fun distraction. This was about standing together, about fighting for something real, something worth holding on to. Jake had given me hands-on training, all right, but what he really gave me was a chance to believe in something new, in us. And whatever came next, I was ready to dive in. The tension around Jake's family and the looming threat of losing the docks hung over us like a storm cloud. But honestly, it didn't feel like that. It felt more like a challenge we had to face together, even if I wasn't sure what that would look like. The boat races suddenly had a new meaning. Not just competition, but a way to fight for this place, for Jake, and maybe for us. We spent the next few days working late into the evenings, fixing up the boat to be as fast and reliable as possible. Jake was quieter than usual, but every once in a while he'd catch my eye, that familiar spark of determination flickering back. One evening, as the sun was dipping low and painting the sky in shades of amber, we sat on the dock, the boat resting beside us like a silent partner in this unfolding story. "Do you think we can really stop the sail?" I asked, watching the waves lap gently against the pilings. Jake shrugged, fingers tracing idle circles on the wood. "I don't know, but I'm not ready to give up without a fight. This place made me who I am. It's in my blood." I nodded, feeling something swell in my chest. Then we fight, together. He turned to me, eyes softening. I'm glad you're here, Mark. More than just for the boat. I don't want to be alone in this. That night, we found ourselves sitting closer than usual, the warmth from his body seeping into mine. When his hand found mine, I didn't pull away. Instead, I squeezed gently, letting the moment stretch out between us. A few days later, the unexpected happened. Jake's family showed up at the dock, his dad, uncle, and even his sister. I was surprised. I hadn't met them before, and I wasn't sure what to expect. Jake introduced me, his voice steady, but with a hint of nervousness. This is Mark. He's been helping me with the boat and the race. His sister gave me a once-over, then nodded approvingly. Glad you're here to support him. His dad, a gruff man with weathered hands and eyes that seemed to have seen a lifetime of storms, looked at me quietly. You're good for him. That's what matters. I felt a mix of relief and pride. Jake's family might have their doubts about the docks and the future, but here, in this moment, they were willing to accept me. And maybe, just maybe, that felt like a step towards something bigger. The weeks leading up to the next race were a whirlwind. We worked harder than ever, fine-tuning the boat, building strategies, and somehow, in between all the grease and adrenaline, growing closer. Jake's smiles became more frequent, his teasing more playful, and the way he looked at me made my heart do things I hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while we were testing the engine, I noticed Jake's gaze lingering on me longer than usual. He wiped his hands and said, You've come a long way, you know. From almost falling into the harbor to practically knowing your way around an engine. I laughed, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. You're not so bad yourself as a mechanic or a coach. He stepped closer, voice dropping. There's more to me than just fixing boats, Mark. I raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? Like what? His smile was slow, teasing. Maybe you'll find out. That night, after the docks had quieted down and the last of the lights flickered off, Jake knocked on my door. When I opened it, he was holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. Thought you could use a late-night caffeine boost, he said, stepping inside. We sat together in the small living room, the silence between us comfortable and familiar. Then, out of nowhere, he reached over and tucked a loose curl behind my ear. I'm glad you're here, he said softly. I swallowed, heart pounding. Me too. That simple confession hung in the air, and before I could overthink it, I leaned in. Our lips met, tentative at first, then with a growing certainty that felt like coming home. His hands cradled my face, and I melted into the warmth and promise of that kiss. Afterward, we stayed close, talking in whispers about everything and nothing, the world shrinking down to just us. But as the big day of the race approached, the pressure mounted. Jake's family was still divided on the docks, the developers' offers growing more insistent, and the town was buzzing with rumors. One afternoon, I caught Jake staring out at the water, a storm behind his eyes. You okay? I asked, stepping beside him. He sighed. I'm scared, Mark. Scared of losing this place. Scared of what comes next. I took his hand, steadying both of us. Whatever happens, we face it together. He nodded, leaning his head against my shoulder. Together, race day arrived faster than I expected. The docks were alive with energy, locals cheering, engines roaring, and the smell of salt and gasoline thick in the air. Jake and I climbed into the boat, the culmination of weeks of sweat, hope, and late-night talks. As the race began, adrenaline surged through me. We worked in perfect sync, the boat slicing through the waves with power and grace. The wind whipped against our faces, and for a few glorious moments, nothing else mattered. But then, halfway through, a sharp jolt rocked the boat. A mechanical failure. Panic surged, but Jake's steady voice cut through it. Hold on, Mark. We can fix this. Together, we scrambled, hands moving fast, hearts pounding. I realized then that the hands-on training was about more than boats. It was about trust, about being there when it counted. We managed to get the engine running again, pushing harder than before. The crowd's cheers grew louder as we crossed the finish line. Not first, but far from last. On the dock, Jake looked at me, eyes shining. "You did good." I grinned, breathless. "So did you." As the sun set over the harbor, casting a golden glow, I knew that whatever storms lay ahead, family, future, fears, we'd face them side by side. And that was worth more than any race win. The days after the race felt different. There was an unspoken shift, like the weight of uncertainty was still there, but softened somehow by what we'd been through. Jake and I kept working on the boat, but more than that, we found ourselves carving out quiet moments. Simple things like sitting on the dock, watching the tide roll in, sharing coffee in the mornings, and those easy conversations that didn't feel forced. One evening, Jake pulled me aside by the water's edge. The sky was streaked with pinks and purples, the kind of sunset that makes everything feel a little more hopeful. "I talked with my family," he said, voice steady but with a hint of relief. "They're not all on board with keeping the docks like they are, but they're willing to listen. Maybe there's a way to make this work without losing what we love." I smiled, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease. "That sounds like a start." He looked at me then, something soft and certain in his eyes. "You've changed a lot about how I see things, Mark. About me, about what's possible." I felt a warmth spread through me. You did the same for me. We stood there for a moment, the sounds of the harbor settling around us. Then Jake reached out, fingers brushing mine gently, like a promise. "I don't want this summer to end," he said quietly. "Me neither." I admitted. It wasn't some grand declaration or dramatic confession. It was honest and simple. Two people who had found something real in an unexpected place. Over the next few weeks, our bond deepened naturally. We supported each other through the family talks, the boat races, and the quiet struggles that no one else saw. It wasn't perfect. We had moments of doubt and frustration, but those moments only made the good ones stronger. One afternoon, as we finished fixing a stubborn engine part, Jake wiped his hands and caught my eye. "You ready to see where this goes? Not just with the boat, but with us?" I smiled, heart steady. "Yeah, I'm ready." And just like that, the docks didn't feel like a temporary stop anymore. They felt like home, a place where I learned what it meant to trust, to fight for something, and to let someone in. Jake became more than just the boat mechanic with grease on his hands. He became the one I wanted to stand beside, in the noisy hum of the harbor and the quiet moments after. The summer taught me that sometimes you don't find your way alone. Sometimes it takes a little hands-on training, not just with engines, but with hearts, to figure out what really matters. And for me, that was worth every rusty bolt, every salty breeze, and every moment with Jake on the dock.